artificial intelligence. It feels like you can't go anywhere today without hearing about AI and what the future might hold for organizations today. So, to get to the bottom of it, we're here today with Jim Liddle, the Chief Innovation Officer for Data Intelligence and AI at Nasuni. Hi, Jim. Thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome.
The AI conversation is a truly massive one, so I think it would be helpful to start with a baseline. So from your perspective, why have AI technologies suddenly gathered so much pace? What has changed?
Yeah, it's a good question because obviously it seems to have exploded in the last, say, 12 months. Actually, machine learning technologies have been around for decades. For example, neural networks gained traction in the late 1980s when British Canadian researcher Geoffrey Hinton, people might know him if they know anything about machine learning. He compared the human brain, to the concept of how learning techniques work. And that really created the concept of the neural network. Fast forward to, maybe 2014, 2015, and recurring neural networks, as they are known, or RNNs, elevated neural networks further. And they started to be used for things like natural language processing tasks, such as, translation, which you'll have seen, on the web through things like Google Translation and Bing Translate. Probably a large step forward occurred when what is known as the seminal paper from Google, which is called Attention is All You Need, was published. This highlighted a different type of machine learning architecture called the transformer architecture. And the main difference between the previous RNN ML architecture and the transformer architecture, in layman's terms, was that the RNN architecture, the recurring neural network architecture, is a sequence-based machine learning architecture, whereas the transformer architecture is highly parallelizable, which means it can speed up the training of the models and the inference of the models therein when it's answering questions. However, that transformer architecture, by the nature of its doing more, was very computationally and is very computationally expensive. So it only really became feasible with the increasing availability of the cloud and the GPUs, becoming more powerful, and specific processing units, for machine learning called TPUs, or tensor processing units. So it got better and more powerful through that difference in the architecture and the better hardware and cloud platforms to run that architecture. This enabled the model sizes to increase to billions of parameters. And that led to models such as what we see today with ChatGPT-3 and ChatGPT-4. Additional to this, I guess, was the availability of very high quality public training data sets, because you need good training data sets to be able to get to that advanced stage with those LLMs. So that was very instrumental to the how did we get here from an AI perspective, especially with regards to what we see today with natural language and generative AI.
So it seems like with AI, more power means more possibilities. But the problem with more possibilities is nobody is entirely sure then what possibilities they want to pursue or what is open to them and their organization. So what can AI actually do for organizations today?
I think even in this, short explosion of AI technologies, we've already seen a vast number of use cases in which AI can help companies. So it might be better just thinking about some examples. So one is cost efficiencies. We've already seen that AI can be used as first, second line for customer interactions for web-based sales and support chat. That's already there. It's been rolled out. You've probably seen lots of articles about people using that. Voice AI, for example, is already making inroads into call centers. So you're not necessarily talking to a person on the other end. You're talking to, voice intelligence. These really improve the efficiencies in that type of data-driven work. There are productivity efficiencies. When internal company data is made available to a natural language foundational model, employee productivity can go up. Why? Because employees are no longer searching for data. They are reviewing contextual answers to questions and getting insights on the data that they may not otherwise be able to. So productivity is a really big thing. There are new revenue opportunities. We've already seen that AI and generative AI can be the catalyst for new data-driven products and services. You probably use some today, you've probably seen some. Competitive differentiation. Innovative AI capabilities give companies who embrace it a huge leap up over companies that don't. So it's almost a case of, if you're not doing it, your competitor is. Better risk management, cybersecurity risk management, data, a lot of it is about the data. So AI can be used to provide better cybersecurity, increase ransomware protection. It can automate identifying potential PII leaks that can lead to legislative issues. So better risk management. I guess the low-hanging fruit for many companies will just be improvements in the apps and services they use. So many vendors today have already embedded some form of AI into the apps and services that typically will be used inside of the company today. This really, for me, is the low-hanging fruit of how enterprises and companies can get a real boost from an AI perspective without actually doing too much. And then we've got other things like vertical AI improvements. There's been a huge upswell in specific verticalized AI system. A verticalized AI system is really a system that's been trained to execute a specific task for a particular function, for a particular vertical. So in the industry today, there are already examples of this in like the media industry, the healthcare industry, the energy industry, all of which have released specific vertical AI applications to boost productivity, efficiency. And I could go on, I guess, but these are just kind of a smattering of the kind of improvements that companies can expect from embracing AI.
So for those organizations looking to embrace AI, what should they be doing to prepare themselves to take advantage of this technology?
Again, another really good question. And I guess a lot of companies are sat there thinking exactly the same. What do I do? What should I do first? I think the first probably is around trust. I guess in a lot of enterprises, AI might well not be able to be used today. Public foundational large language models, which people have used, can use the input data that they received as training data. So enterprises should think about having policies in place for employees with regards to their interactions with these public LLMs, because that could well lead to like PII leakage, IPR data leakage. And actually, there's a very famous incident that's public. I won't name who they are, but it was an electronic manufacturer whose staff used a public, LLM, which resulted in their private notes and source code being leaked and available to anyone who queried that LLM. So it's important to have those types of, policies and procedures in place. I think the next big step enterprises can do is to consider their data strategy. Some of them will already have been looking at that because of COVID and their digital data strategy. But this again is another move forward. So many companies now are changing their thinking. They're thinking about, how do I transition from a storage-centric state of mind to a data-centric one? I've heard about AI. How can I obtain value from my data? And I think there are a number of things that probably companies should think about to get ready for this data-centric approach. One is, simple, coalescing and centralizing the data. Ultimately, you've got to be able to get your data into an LLM model. So pipeline data architectures for submitting data to the large language models need to be efficient and easier, and they'll be efficient and easier if the data is centralized that you want to interact with. Lots of organizations have silos of data scattered all over the place. That doesn't really lend itself well to those types of models. Then there's the curation of data. So a lot of enterprise data can be referred to as dark data. Dark data is data that is stored but essentially untapped today, because over time, it becomes hidden. Do you interact with the data that you created, last week, 60 days ago, 90 days ago, last year? So it gets hidden quite quickly. So prior to sending any data sets to any private LLMs that the company are thinking about, they should think about indexing that data, classifying it so it's better understood. Look at things like IPR and what they might not want to have in the model. Look at things like whether it contains PII data and making sure that that's classified and taken away to begin with. Should also be thinking about data protection. If you think about data becoming more valuable and increasingly becoming more valuable, then obviously it's going to be prone to more risks, more cybersecurity risks, such as ransomware attacks. And I think companies should think about data protection solutions that are intrinsic to their architecture, i.e. they offer privacy by design. It's not just, I'm going to back up my data. How do you know that you can get your data back very quickly if, in the worst case, something really bad happens? I think they also need to think about evaluating some of those private large language models. So obviously, I talked earlier about public large language models. They can use the input to train for future releases. So a number of vendors are now starting to offer very large private large models. These are sandboxed. Their guarantee is the data does not bleed into their public LLM instances, so it remains completely private to the customer. I think companies should start to think about making their own evaluations of these vendor offerings. They need to make sure they're satisfied with the privacy policies. They need to check how the training data was procured. They need to understand the scope of what they offer in their model. So there's a whole heap of things that they can do there.
We are only just beginning to scratch the surface of the AI conversation, but unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much, Jim, for joining us and sharing your insights. One last question before we go then. Is it time for organizations to start embracing the AI revolution?
Well, I think the answer to that is uncategorically yes. I think we're seeing, week on week, month on month, rapid iterations in those kind of large language models and AI in general, and that's only going to continue to grow. And I think the earlier that an organization can prepare itself and get itself on the truck, the more value it's going to gain for itself moving forward.